The snow was falling so hard that I could barely see my own hands in front of me. What was supposed to be a simple trip to my best friend's cabin had turned into a nightmare. The blizzard hit faster than anyone could have expected, and now the wind was howling like it was trying to swallow us whole. My best friend had gone ahead to grab extra supplies, leaving me stranded with his mom, someone I had known casually but never this close. We huddled together behind a large boulder, trying to shield ourselves from the biting cold. I could see her shivering, her face pale, and the panic in her eyes mirrored my own. That's when she whispered something that made my heart skip a beat. "We need to share body heat if we want to survive." Her voice was calm but urgent, a strange mix of fear and determination. I froze, unsure of what to do, but the cold was already creeping through my jacket, making it impossible to think clearly. Every second felt like an hour as the storm raged around us. The snow piled higher, the wind slammed against us, and the world outside seemed to disappear completely. I realized that surviving this blizzard wouldn't just be about finding shelter, would be about trust, decisions under pressure, and facing a situation I never imagined I'd be in. As we pressed together, trying to stay warm, I couldn't help but wonder, would we make it through the night? Or would the storm claim us before help arrived? The answer wasn't clear, and the tension was unbearable. I could feel the cold seeping through every layer of my clothing, and yet the thought of being alone in this blizzard was even worse. His mom, Mrs. Carter, though I'd always called her by her first name, Linda had this calm, almost commanding presence that made it impossible to panic entirely. She wrapped her arms around herself, then glanced at me, her eyes serious. "Listen," she said, "we need to stay awake. Hypothermia can set in faster than you think. Talking helps." We started to talk, sharing stories about my best friend, our lives, and even small childhood memories. I realized I didn't know much about her beyond the casual hellos at the neighborhood barbecues. There was a quiet strength about her, a resilience I hadn't noticed before. Yet, underneath it all, I could see a flicker of fear, the kind that comes from knowing nature is far stronger than us. The wind roared, and the snow seemed to pile higher, covering the rock we were using for shelter. I kept glancing at the dim outline of the forest, wondering if my friend would return soon, or if the storm had already blocked his path. Every minute stretched painfully long. The cold made my fingers numb, and even as we tried to move closer for warmth, the situation felt more desperate with every passing second. I couldn't shake the thought that we were completely at the mercy of this storm, and the questions in my mind kept growing. How long would we survive out here? Could we make it to the cabin before nightfall? And, somehow, I felt this wasn't just about surviving the cold. Anymore, it was about trust, and whether either of us could hold it together until help came. The hours passed slowly, each one heavier than the last, and the blizzard showed no sign of letting up. My teeth chattered, and every movement felt like a battle against the cold. Linda kept talking, her voice steady, sharing survival tips she had learned from years of hiking and camping. I realized then that she wasn't just my best friend's mom, she was resourceful, disciplined, and maybe even braver than I could ever imagine. But beneath that calm exterior, I could sense her anxiety, the tension that came from being trapped in a place where help could be ours or, even days away. I tried to keep my mind occupied, thinking about my friend, wondering if he had even made it through the storm. My phone had died long ago, leaving us completely cut off. The isolation pressed on me like a weight, and I started imagining all the worst-case scenarios. Linda noticed my unease and gave me a look that reminded me she had been through her share of challenges. "Panicking won't help," she said softly. "We have to focus on the next step, finding better shelter, keeping our energy up." As we shifted to get more comfortable, I realized that staying warm wasn't the only struggle. There was a tension in the silence, a mix of fear and the unspoken awareness that we were two people caught in a situation neither of us expected. Outside, the wind screamed, and snowflakes hit the rock like tiny knives. Each gust made me wonder if the storm would finally drive us to the edge, testing not just our endurance, but our ability to rely on one another. The night was far from over, and I knew that surviving the blizzard would demand more than just staying warm. It would demand every ounce of focus, courage, and trust we could muster. The night had settled into a deep, suffocating darkness, and the storm wasn't slowing down. Every gust of wind made the rock we were huddled behind tremble, sending icy shards of snow into our faces. I could barely hear myself think over the roar of the blizzard, and even with Linda's steady presence beside me, a creeping sense of panic started to set in. My fingers and toes were numb, and every muscle ached from the cold. Survival was no longer just a matter of staying warm. It was about keeping our minds sharp while the world outside threatened to swallow us whole. We tried to move closer to find better shelter, crawling through the snow that was now waist-deep in some places. Each step was exhausting, and the cold burned through our layers. Linda's voice, calm but strained, guided me through the drifts. I noticed the worry etched deeper into her face, a reminder that she was just as human, just as vulnerable as I was, despite her composure. The isolation felt heavier with every passing minute, and I realized we were completely at the mercy of the storm. Suddenly, a sharp cracking sound echoed through the trees, and we both froze. It sounded like a branch breaking under the weight of the snow, or worse, something else moving closer. My heart raced, and I could see Linda tense beside me. "Stay still," she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. Every instinct screamed danger. The cold was brutal, but fear was even more unbearable. In that moment, I understood the storm wasn't our only enemy anymore. Whatever was out there or whatever could go wrong was closing in fast. I could feel the climax of the night approaching, each second stretching like hours. The wind screamed louder, the snow blinded us, and the uncertainty of what might happen next pressed down like a weight. We were trapped, exhausted, and teetering on the edge of something that could change everything. The tension was unbearable, and the question hung between us and the frozen air. Would we survive this night, or would the blizzard finally claim us? Just as we thought the worst of the storm was surrounding us, a new unexpected problem emerged. A low rumbling sound began beneath the snow, faint at first, then growing louder with every second. I looked at Linda, and her eyes widened in alarm. An avalanche, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. My stomach dropped. We had been so focused on staying warm and finding shelter, we hadn't even noticed the snow piling dangerously above us on the steep slope nearby. Panic surged through me, but I could see Linda fighting to stay calm. We have to move now, she said, grabbing my arm. Every step through the snow was like wading through ice, and the cold had numbed my strength. The weight of the situation hit me fully. The storm had trapped us. The cold was relentless, and now the land itself seemed determined to bury us alive. The sense of isolation intensified. There was no way to call for help, no phone, no guide. It was just us against nature. Then, as we scrambled toward what looked like slightly safer ground, a sudden flash of movement caught my eye. Through the swirling snow, I could make out a figure trudging toward USA stranger, bundled in a thick coat, but moving with a speed and purpose that seemed almost impossible in the blizzard. My heart raced with confusion and suspicion. Who could it be? Another survivor, or someone or something else entirely. The storm's roar, the avalanche threat, and now this mysterious figure combined into a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Every instinct screamed danger, yet there was no time to overthink. The night had escalated into something far more unpredictable than I could have imagined, and the climax of this ordeal was barreling toward us faster than the blizzard itself. We barely had time to react before the ground beneath us trembled. The avalanche had begun, a wall of snow and ice thundering down the slope faster than we could have imagined. Heart pounding, I grabbed Linda's hand, and we sprinted toward a narrow crevice in the rock face that offered the slightest protection. Snow exploded around us, sharp flakes stinging our faces, and for a terrifying moment, it felt like the storm itself was determined to swallow us whole. We pressed into the crevice, shivering violently, teeth chattering, as the avalanche thundered past, shaking the earth beneath our feet. I could feel my lungs burning from the cold and the panic, but Linda stayed calm, wrapping her coat tightly around both of us. We made it, she whispered, though her voice was tinged with disbelief. For a moment, relief washed over me. We had survived the blizzard, the snow, and the avalanche. Together, then the figure I had seen through the storm stumbled into the crevice, coughing and covered in snow. It was my best friend, exhausted but alive. Relief and disbelief collided, and I realized that somehow he had managed to navigate through the blizzard to find us. Tears mixed with snow on his face as he collapsed beside us. The danger wasn't entirely over, but together, we had survived what had seemed